let your experience begin right now. From high atop the mountains of British Columbia to you listening around the world, this is Spaced Out Radio. You can follow us on our website, spacedoutradio.com, on Twitter, @SpacedOutRadio. Give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can follow us on Instagram, Dave Scott, SOR, or on our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show. Buckle up, space travelers. It's time to go for a ride as we are live on Spaced Out Radio.
Sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The deeper I go, the deeper I fall.
Good evening and welcome to Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott, and thank you so much for tuning in at spacedoutradio.com. As once again we come in from the frozen Canadian tundra, battle our way past the wild animals, sidestep Bigfoot, and enter Uncle Jimbo's cabin, stoke the fire, heat this place up, and broadcast you live on this Thursday night, early Friday morning if you're on the East Coast. Here at SOR, we do this thing 7 days a week. We want to be your official one-stop shop when it comes to the supernatural, paranormal, conspiratorial, cryptozoological, and so much more. And if you notice, we have a new kick-ass theme song from guitarist and guitar god Ron Bumblefoot THAL. You can find his new album, Little Brother Is Watching, by going to spacedoutradio.com. If you're a social media junkie like I am, you can follow us on Twitter, @SpacedOutRadio. You can give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show, and you can ask to join our private Spaced Out Radio group as well as Podcast Central. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spaced Out Radio Show, and of course our website is spacedoutradio.com. At this time, we'd love to send a shout-out to our fans in the Spaced Out Radio chat room, along with our new fans at Paranormal Into the Night and Paranormal Forum. Hey, if you head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, you can check out Cat's Corner. Psychic Catherine Fallman will answer one lucky listener's submitted question per week. And tonight's show is brought to you by Rivulet Reiki and Readings, providing healings in person or at a distance. Spaced Out Radio listeners receive a 10% discount on pricing. PurplePlates.com. Help heal your body, mind, and soul. Drop into their site and heal yourself today. 80,000 people a month read the new Agora newspaper. Find out what's happening around the world regarding the other side of politics, health, supernatural, paranormal, and so much more. And if you have $1 and you have an iPhone, you can download the Spirit Storybox. Spirit Storybox, the official ghost hunting app of Spaced Out Radio. Tonight, we are lucky to have one of the most popular hunters in the crypto field, Lyle Blackburn, to join us on Spaced Out Radio. If there's a monster in the forest, swamp, mountains, or water, he's on it. He wants to know what people are seeing. He wants to experience what others have encountered. Lyle has had a lifelong fascination with legends and citing reports of real-life monsters. During his research, Lyle has often explored the remote reaches of the southern U.S. in search of shadowy creatures said to inhabit these dense backwoods and swamplands of the areas. Lyle has appeared on various television shows airing on Discovery, Animal Planet, Destination America, A&E, HGTV, and CBS. Most recently, he has served as a consulting producer and special episode host for the TV show Monsters and Mysteries in America. He's a talented author about his adventures and investigations, and tonight He's on Spaced Out Radio to tell us truly what's wandering out there. Lyle, thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio tonight. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you on the air. A couple of months ago, we had Shannon Legro on the show, and she talked so highly of you and said, Dave, you got to get Lyle on the air. So I thank you for joining that, and I thank Shannon for recommending we do this interview with you.
Oh yeah, she's a great friend, and apparently my unpaid publicist here. So that's awesome.
Oh, for sure. Lyle, for people who may not be familiar, because we're broadcasting out of Canada, and even though most of our listenership is in the United States, there are still a lot of people around this planet who aren't sure who you are. So I would love it if you give us a breakdown on how you got into the crypto field.
Well, I was born and raised in Texas, and from a very early age, I was interested in cryptids. I saw shows like In Search Of on TV when I was very young, and saw glimpses of Bigfoot on those shows, and it really fascinated me. I was always enthralled by horror movies, but I always knew there was something behind that was a mask or makeup. But with cryptids, it really captured my imagination and actually frightened me, because I thought these things could really be out there. And so I just spent most of my life just being an armchair reader of these books, and I spent most of my life as a musician and things like that. But I'd always had a desire to write a book or write some books, and at some point I just decided, what is my favorite topic of fascination? What have I followed, and what would I write about? And that was cryptozoology, and just one thing led to another, and wrote my first book, The Beast of Boggy Creek, which was on the subject of a famous southern Sasquatch case that was dramatized in a movie called The Legend of Boggy Creek. And from there, it just sort of catapulted me into this world of cryptozoology. So it's been going on years now, in which I've been pretty much immersed in this subject. I've written other books and books that are coming out. So it just sort of took a left turn for me, and went from music to monster hunting. And so here we are now.
I'm really surprised that you didn't have your own experience. You did this off of love for the topic, because so many people fall into these categories of research because they have an experience that didn't make sense to them. So you're actually coming from this on an interest level rather than an experiencer level.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I did spend a lot of time in the woods when I grew up. My father is a avid bow hunter, so I spent plenty of time out there, in places where Bigfoots have been reported. But for me, I've seen some strange things, and I've heard some strange things, but I've never actually seen something I could definitively say was a cryptid. And so, yeah, I come at it from almost more of just a fascination and sort of an investigative journalist standpoint of, hey, let's see what there is to this. Let's talk to the witnesses and that sort of stuff. And as much as I do actually go out in these places, and I do go deep into the woods and in bayous and everywhere else, I've never actually laid eyes on anything. Although in recent years, the more I get out, the more I've found suspected tracks, and I've heard some very strange howls. So, hopefully at one point I'll have my own sighting, but it doesn't faze me. I just follow the story as it leads.
Did you take a lot of heckling from your friends in the music industry when you decided to get into this field? Because let's face it, when you say you're going out there hunting Bigfoot or hunting any sort of creature out in the forest, there's always those people who giggle behind your back or even to your face who say you're absolutely ridiculous for trying to make this a career.
Well, oddly enough, no one has ever said anything to me, to my face at least. And what I find that most of my fans in the music world, while on one hand, I haven't been recording music and that sort of thing, but they are absolutely fascinated with this. I mean, in fact, I've probably turned a lot of people onto the subject. So nobody has ever heckled me or anything like that, in terms of music fans or followers from my previous endeavors. And it's really been amazing, and I'm really surprised. I mean, if I go somewhere now, those fans who will come up to me and they want to, the first thing they ask is, how's the Bigfoot thing going or whatever, and they want to know. So it's amazing.
Do you feel kind of lucky in that regard? Because there are so many people out there who have taken so much harassment, whether it's online with social media, as cruel as that can be, or whether it's face to face or behind people's backs talking to family members or whatever, that saying, this person's not right. They're seeing Bigfoot or they're seeing Lizard Man or something along those lines. So knowing how people can be, you must feel fortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. In some regards, I think I relate well to people, though. I mean, you I don't come across as trying to convince you that they exist, and I don't try to convince you they don't exist. I mean, I can identify with people who are skeptical, but once I can explain a little bit to them about how many people I've talked to and how you just cannot explain away all these incidents, people tend to listen, and they don't, I think they don't ridicule me in the sense of, oh, well, he's hunting Bigfoot, he must be crazy. It's like, wow, that sounds interesting. And my books have been well received because of that. I'm very balanced in that regard. And like I say, it's somewhat of a investigative journalist. I just happen to follow cases of people reporting monsters, but I try to do it in a very intellectual and fair and balanced way that people don't find much room to give me the grief. Although, from being on TV shows and such, I do look a little bit different. I wear a black cowboy hat, and I have tattoos, and I don't exactly look like a cryptozoologist. I guess supposedly look. So I've seen more people who are, give me criticism based on that, like I need to wear a lab coat or something. I don't know, but I'm not I don't claim to be a scientist, though I can follow scientific protocol when necessary if I do find evidence. But I think I've been lucky in all that.
We are talking with Lyle Blackburn tonight on Spaced Out Radio. His website, lyleblackburn.com, if you want to check out his books, his music, his research, his writings on the subject. Great website indeed if you want to check it out. Lyle, a lot of people out there who have experiences are so dumbfounded by what they have seen or what they have experienced. Do you find the people you talk to when you start your investigation are very, very nervous to even talk about the subject? Do you have to warm them up in order to get their story?
Yeah, I definitely see that, and I feel like it's something that you have to be respectful of when you do interview these people, because you can understand. Obviously, we've been talking about the ridicule you can get when you come out and say you've seen something. That they're hesitant to say this a lot of times, but again, I'm good at identifying with them and saying, hey, I totally understand where you're coming from. And I can assure you that I've talked to many other people who have the same experiences, and I'm not judging you anyway. I just am interested in hearing your story and just, trying to see if we can find out if there's any basis to it, or, I'm just as interested in it as they are. And I think once I get a person to see that I'm not going to laugh, or I'm not, if I write about it, it's going to be in a very respectful way. They end up trusting me and coming forward with the information.
How long does it usually take you to build that trust? Because there are people out there where they are so nervous about being called a crackpot or to be ridiculed by it that, it does take time to break down those barriers.
Yeah, I mean, it does. I mean, there's been cases where, some people are more willing to talk about it, and those are the people that usually don't care what people think. And then there's some people that are a little nervous about it, and I may have to talk to them a couple of times or meet them. Usually if I can meet them in person, that's usually does it. And I mean, when I wrote my book, The Beast of Boggy Creek, which was about the Fylth monster in southern Arkansas, that was a really extreme case, because the movie that had been made about that case, The Legend of Boggy Creek, which came out in 1972, that whole town, everybody there suffered a lot of ridicule of people coming into their town trying to hunt the monster. I mean, it was this huge deal, and it sort of left a scar on the people in the town. And so that was a huge case because I was starting even further behind the line there of trying to get these people to come forward and share their information so that I could write a historical book on it. And again, that took sometimes literally, I still investigate there a lot, and it's taken me literally years to get the trust of some people to come forward with things that they've seen. So it's just an ongoing process.
What about the people out there when you were interviewing them, Lyle, that only seem to want their 15 minutes of fame, and you know that you're seeing right through them? Take us through that process when you are vetting a person to see whether or not their story is real or just fantasy.
Well, hopefully you feel like you have a good sense of, what is real and what is not, and people who are too quick to tell you things, and people who, in my mind, have literally experienced too much. Because I've been out in the woods all my life. I've been camping, I've been hunting, and I've been all over with. I've probably been to about 47 of the states in the U.S. So I've been around quite a bit. And if I feel that somebody is like just way too much has happened, I quickly get a sense about that. And if I feel like that, they're trying to look for that 15 minutes, it's usually pretty apparent. And I will be respectful and I will listen to the story, but, usually it just ends there. And the people, though, that I feel like have a legitimate story, I may often become friends with those people with follow-up questions. And then, they may turn me on to somebody else that they know that saw something. So, it's pretty, I wouldn't say it's easy to weed out the imposters, but it comes to the surface once you start speaking to them.
And it's one of those things too where you have to do your due diligence as an investigator to make sure that you're not being taken down a dark path or a fantasy path where you're having a bunch of time wasted on your own shoulders as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I literally don't have time to waste, and those kind of things, I just need to be, cut off quickly. And I think that's, again, there's, the fans of my books, and one things that people have responded to is that I have included the credible accounts. There's been plenty of them that I just disregard and throw out. And that's the thing. I don't even need to include the ones that are doubtful, because there's plenty of other very legit cases that I followed up on that are worthy of the story. So, if it's something that seems, not legit, or the person's lying, or the person just seems delusional, I don't waste time with it.
We are talking with Lyle Blackburn tonight, cryptozoologist out of Texas. His website, lyleblackburn.com, if you want to check out his books, his bio, his writings on everything crypto, go to his site today. Lyle, you have a lot of experience with television. And when we bring in people, as we were just talking about the people who you have to vet to make sure that their stories are correct and real, do you look at the whole situation where, because you're a gentleman with television experience on multiple different networks, that these people sometimes are seeing stars in their eyes, that maybe if I can get my story on television, that I can make a name for myself and all of a sudden become the next Lyle Blackburn? Do you ever deal with that?
Yeah, there's been a few cases of that. There's not a lot, but yeah, certainly I can see where people, have contacted me because they see me on a show, and then they tell me some stuff, and if I don't, maybe I don't follow up, or maybe I don't feel like it's, worthwhile, or then more and more starts coming, and it just seems like they're just so geared towards getting on a show. But really, truly, what I find is that it's the opposite. It's usually, I'm working for a show such as Monsters and Mysteries in America, where I'm developing some of the episodes, and I know some great witnesses that have had encounters and just the right thing that we would be looking for. And it's actually hard to convince a lot of these people to even get on TV. They're just like, they don't want to share it on that big of a level. They're, maybe they're uncomfortable on camera. So a lot of times, I've unfortunately some of the cases where I feel like it would be great that these witnesses would come on and share the story, they just don't. So there's both ways. People what they feel about the TV.
Well, let me ask you this about the television show. I see on the radio side, as someone with a lot of radio experience in the true terrestrial form, that in these fields, whether it's paranormal, supernatural, ufological, or cryptozoological, it seems like everyone and their dog has their own radio show now. Do you see that kind of entering the television realm? Because everywhere now there seems to be a Bigfoot show or a UFO show or some sort of crypto show.
Yeah, certainly I do. I think the more of those out there, and it's just like, I don't know, it's just so much, and it's just everybody has an encounter, and it's just starting to. To me, my radar goes off. It's like it just seems like too much. If people are seeing this much stuff and this much paranormal and cryptozoological activities going on, it just doesn't make a lot of sense, because if animals are being seen that much, then it's much more likely that one would get run over by a car or whatever else. These creatures would be much more elusive. So I think that, yeah, all the radio shows and television and the need for content ends up people, let through people that don't have as credible a reputation, I think. And so that makes it hard to sort out what's real and what's not. And one reason I did participate with that show, Monsters and Mysteries in America, and Finding Bigfoot even, is because I felt like that they were critical about who they were putting on there and the stories. They were trying to be accurate, and they were trying to use real witnesses. And now you've got this whole host of other shows that is completely staged. The witnesses are fake and the whole deal. And, I would never touch those shows. And, I think that's become a huge problem.
Is it a little too much for the public to handle? And do you feel it actually hurts the work that true researchers like you and many others, whether it's Jeff Meldrum, whether it's John Bindernagel, or whoever in the field of Sasquatch, do you feel that it hurts the credibility of what you guys have done?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, because the average viewer, I can't really discern what is real and what is fake. People, when I won't mention some of the shows, but people will send me messages. Oh my God, what do you think about that? It was amazing. This guy on the show. I said, that's not real. That witness that was saying that, or that video they were presenting, was staged. It wasn't real. So it's a lot of confusion, and therefore, what they're doing on those shows, if they're doing goofy stuff, making traps for monsters and whatever, people, equate that with what maybe Dr. Meldrum and I are doing with more of the serious research. So yes, I think that becomes a problem, and all I can do and myself is just concentrate on the things I can control, like my books especially, is to try to write very intelligent and well-written books, and hopefully that's comes through a little bit better than what you might see on TV. I think people realize that TV often is just throwing a lot of stuff at you.
I think a lot of people do realize that, but there's also the group now who wants to be the weekend warriors. We see it in the paranormal field, we see it in the crypto field and the ufological field, where they are now going out every weekend. They're buying the gear. They are going to be the one who proves Sasquatch exists, or Lizard Man exists, or Dog Man exists. Do you think that it has created a culture where people who maybe are not familiar with being outdoors and being out in the wilderness are putting themselves in danger because they see what you guys are doing? They don't understand that you've shot 40 to 60 hours of film to break down into a 47-minute segment, and now here they are out there trying to do things that you guys are doing on a copycat level.
Yeah, I agree that it can put people in dangerous situations, and it also puts the weekend warrior type thing, people who are unfamiliar with the woods, for example. I've seen this over and over where somebody starts describing, oh, it was right outside my tent and it was this howl, and they get close, they describe the whole howl. And I would say something like, have you ever heard a fox? Do you know what the noises that a fox make? Well, no. Well, the fox make very strange noises. And if people aren't familiar with that, suddenly they think it sounds like a juvenile Sasquatch or something. And, I just see that as a problem because they're not experienced in what actually is in the woods, because you have to eliminate the things that we know are there before you can then deduce that may be something unknown. But they seem to just jump to the conclusion that it's unknown because they personally have never heard it or seen it, and they don't. So that, they're enthusiastic, and that's awesome. But as far as, it's with the internet and Facebook and stuff, it just floods social networks with things that are uninvestigated and improperly done. And that kind of clouds the waters from the stuff that has been well researched, and that could possibly be an unknown animal.
We got a couple minutes left before we got to go to break here at the bottom of the hour. We are talking with Lyle Blackburn tonight on Spaced Out Radio. His website, lyleblackburn.com. Lyle, are there too many experts now because of the way social media is, because of the way of television and radio and books out there? Are there too many experts?
Well, I suppose, and I certainly don't want to claim that I'm even an expert, because truly there's no degree of cryptozoology. I don't have a diploma, and it's something that I've just researched on my own time and just put in years and years. So therefore, and if I'm on TV, people call me an expert, and for lack of a better term. But truly, I think people need to have the attitude that no one is an expert, and that we truly don't know a whole lot. You can't make a lot of hard conclusions about this stuff. We got to keep theories open. We got to keep everything on the table, keep an open mind. And I find that, too many people are making, they get an idea of what something is and just stick with it. But you can't be like that. You have to be open-minded and realize there are no experts, because we don't have a body. We don't have a specimen to examine. We don't have that hard evidence in which somebody can study. So we're all just, shooting in the dark until such a time as we can get a specimen.
We are talking with Lyle Blackburn tonight on Spaced Out Radio. We're going to hit up our first break of the night. When we come back, we're going to learn about Sasquatch and the do's and don'ts of being out in the wilderness. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be right back.
Would you like to become one of our space travelers? All you have to do is click on the Space Travelers icon at spacedoutradio.com. For only $5 a month, you can get access to some great prizes, as well as private monthly shows, newsletters, and a members-only section on our website. Become a space traveler today.
Hi there. This is your medium, Joanna, from Spaced Out Weekend, 2 Mediums and a Large. I would love it if you would come and join us with host James Tyson every other Sunday on Spaced Out Weekend. Together, we will take your calls and your questions live. Our goal is to provide you with a positive outlook on deep questions that you may have. Questions regarding love, relationships, money, or whatever else is on your mind. Come and check us out at spacedoutradio.com.
Every Saturday and Sunday night, as Dave Scott wanders aimlessly in the wilderness, you can come hang out with me, James Tyson, in Spaced Out Weekend. Starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, I'll take you along as we talk with some of the best experts in their fields. SpacedOutRadio.com is the place to find us. So sit down, relax, put your feet up. Enjoy the topics like the paranormal, supernatural, intuitiveness, and so much more. Hope to see you there.
Hi there, this is Elizabeth Anglin, and on the last Monday of every month, I join Dave Scott for Spaced Out Radio's Cosmic Passport. We delve into everything from extraterrestrial contact to animal communication. It's a lot of fun, and every month it's something different and exciting. I would love it if you would join us. You can hear and learn from my experiences, and I'd like to know about yours as well. Cosmic Passport on spacedoutradio.com.
Hey everybody, this is Patrick Webster Small, and I'm here to bring you the Webster Phenomena every Saturday night. live at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. If you're looking for aliens and extraterrestrials, well, we've got them. Big and tall, short and small. You're bound to find what you're looking for. So join me on the Webster Phenomena right here on Spaced Out Radio.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit, and expect a miracle.
Have you ever wondered about those weird and strange creatures people have reported throughout history? Do you wonder if those stories are real? Me too, and that's why I started Cryptopia.us. Hey, this is Rob Morphy, crypto historian. Join me once a month on Spaced Out Radio with Dave Scott, where we will get into the odd and bizarre reports, from the Dover Demon to hairy hominids and everything in between. I will break down what people like you and me are seeing at spacedoutradio.com.
Would you like to advertise on Spaced Out Radio? Getting your message out to Spaced Out Radio's listeners will benefit you. Our listeners are loyal, intelligent, and supportive, and they support those who support this broadcast. For pricing and information, you could go to spacedoutradio.com to find the pricing guide that suits your needs, with many options to choose from. Advertise with Spaced Out Radio today by contacting us at info@spacedoutradio.com.
Want to connect with us online? Find us on Facebook, Spaced Out Radio Show, on Twitter @Spaced Out Radio, on Instagram, Dave Scott SOR, on YouTube, Spaced Out Radio Show, and our website is spacedoutradio.com. All right, space travelers, here comes the second half hour of Spaced Out Radio. Welcome back for the second half hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. I am your host, Dave Scott. Thank you so much for tuning in to tonight's show. Hey, if you want to follow us on Twitter, you could do so @SpacedOutRadio. You could give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show, and you can ask to join our private Spaced Out Radio group, as well as our other group, Podcast Central. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott SOR. Our YouTube channel you can subscribe to is Spaced Out Radio Show. And, of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. At this time, we want to say thank you to everyone tuning in at the Spaced Out Radio chat room, Paranormal Into the Night, and Paranormal Forum. And tonight, we are talking cryptids with one of the top investigators in North America, Lyle Blackburn. Lyle, thank you so much for doing this tonight.
You bet.
Right before the break, Lyle, we were talking about going out into the wilderness. It is a dangerous place. Never mind Sasquatch, never mind the cougars, the bears, the wolves, the moose and deer, but the elements are dangerous as well. Do you feel that for people who are rookies or weekend warriors, as we mentioned in the last half hour, really need to study up on what it's like being out in the wilderness before they decide to make this a hobby or even a career path?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that's a good idea. In any case where you're going into places that you may be unfamiliar, you need to study, the land itself, the topography. You need to know what kind of critters may be out there. For example, down here in the South, we have a huge problem with feral hogs, and it's become such a problem that, we walk up on them quite a bit now. And it's a good idea to carry a sidearm or whatever, or just know what to do if one of these animals attacks you, because they can be very dangerous. Not to mention snakes and other things. And, we go in a lot of bayou areas down here. It seems obviously that bayous have reputations for monsters, so they're great places to go. But, you're up against alligators and other things. So you really do need to study up in that regard. And some of my training has been survival training. I've done some marine type training where I've learned some survival skills and what to take with you. Just even taking a survival pack, because you really never know when something's going to happen. You most times everything's fine, but there can be those times when you may find yourself lost or stranded. I mean, all those things have happened. So I always carry a survival pack with certain items in them. And, these are things that I've learned and studied up on. And I think that these are things people really need to take into mind if they're going to go in any remote area. I mean, a lot of these, I see people going to state park campgrounds or whatever. I mean, that's one thing. But if you're truly going out there in places where that are remote and these animals could actually exist and survive, you definitely need to think about that ahead of time.
Let's get to Sasquatch. I am someone who has seen a pair of Sasquatch, and they're a very beautiful creature, in my opinion. I have my own thinking of what they are. What is your opinion of what Sasquatch is?
Well, I just kind of start at the ground level of just, some sort of biologically based primate, something that is just miraculously really evaded discovery up until now. But I certainly acknowledge that there's a certain amount of paranormal theories involved here. But as someone who's never really had a sighting or seen one with my own two eyes, I can't be absolute in everything. All I can do is just have a feeling about what I think it is, and a lot of that is based on the people I've interviewed that have described the creatures to me and described what they've been doing when they saw it. And so for me, I see it as a just an unknown primate that's lived in North America all this time.
See, I thought so too, until a few days after I had my sighting. I went back to the area because it happened in a friend's yard in British Columbia. And up here in British Columbia, right through Cascadia down to the tip of California, there are literally hundreds of sightings of Bigfoot every year. But what really changed my mind on it and made me think whether or not it was a primate was a few days after, when we felt like we were being followed. And we turned back to look at us, and there was actually a pixelation standing there behind us against a cherry tree that went up about 10 feet high. And what made me really think about that is a lot of the First Nations up here believe that Sasquatch is a shapeshifter or interdimensional. Yet a lot of people who are investigating do not take that under consideration. What is your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's certainly something that has to be considered just based on, well, I mean, you telling me what you had seen, the beliefs of the Native American tribes who have obviously lived here longer than we have and know the lands. That just, it's hard for me to come up with good theories on that because there's just so little information on which to base that theory. Again, it's just something where I'm starting at the base, the basic theory of it's a primate. But if I saw one and something strange happened, I may revise that theory. And I know certainly the people that I talk to vary widely in what they believe it is. And it goes from shapeshifter to interdimensional to any number of things. And those are certainly legitimate theories held by everybody because we can't say for certain. So I just kind of stick with more, I guess, of an cryptozoological animal approach to it. I guess that's the best way to say it. But I certainly don't dismiss the intelligent thoughts of others, and certainly the people who claim to have seen it. I mean, they're the people who got closest, so it's all legitimate theories.
We are talking with Lyle Blackburn tonight on Spaced Out Radio. He is a cryptozoologist. You could go to his website, lyleblackburn.com. Sticking with the First Nations and American Indians in regards to this topic, do you think too many researchers are denying the information that those cultures have? As you stated, they've been here a lot longer than the Caucasian people. And yet it seems like for a lot of researchers, we aren't putting the trust or the faith or even the expertise of the history of those stories into our own investigations.
Yeah, I think in some ways there may be a bit of a cultural misunderstanding. And I find that since I'm not an expert on their cultures, sometimes I may not understand exactly what they think and feel, and a lot of them will be happy to tell you, and some of them just sort of don't want to share that with the so-called white man. And I don't blame them. It's something that it in some ways is sacred to them. So I find that sometimes I'm just not sure what to think in regard to that, because I haven't immersed myself in their culture. There's some other experts, Kathy Strange, she's a Bigfoot researcher that does interact with tribes like that, and she certainly is become an expert in that sort of relationship to these tribal stories. And but for me, I certainly don't discount anything they say. And I mean, when I write or talk about a certain area and the history of Bigfoot sightings within that area, I always mention the fact that it was possibly being reported by Native Americans, and they would, refer to it as whatever that name they associated with it. So it's certainly something that you have to take into account as far as the history of sightings of man-like apes in any area. So I think, again, it's just all this would be resolved a little bit if somebody could get a body,
Do you think then that when it comes to these legends from First Nations or American Indians down across the border in your area, that when you look at the stories, that there are a lot of parallels as to what is happening today with sightings?
Somewhat, but I think I do see that when I do talk to tribal members and things like that, they really do have a much more supernatural view of the creature. And I think that, today it just seems like most people, the Bigfoot is just a big primate and things like that. They have a completely different way of looking at it, I think, and I see it just goes off to the point where, we got shimmering and Bigfoots that are shape shifting and disappearing and moving in and out. It's like, man, I don't even know where to go with that, because, I'm just trying to see, find one or just find evidence of or see one in and unto itself before I can make any definite evaluations of shimmering actions and all that sort of stuff. It just goes off into a whole nother realm, I guess.
When you are looking for evidence, what are you looking to find?
Well, I certainly concentrate a lot on footprint research. A lot of times when I'm in the woods, I kind of use kind of a twofold approach. One, I grew up as a hunter, and I was successful at, being still and quiet and viewing animals. And so oftentimes I go into places where creatures are said to exist, and I go into the most remote part and I stake those areas out. And then in sometimes I will just literally walk for miles looking for tracks. You can go into areas, especially after it's rained the week before or something. You got a lot of great areas where you could potentially find a great track. So a lot of times we'll go down these old logging roads or roads into these wildlife management areas and just literally walk and walk and walk, just looking for tracks, because not that the track is going to necessarily prove anything, but it would show me, if I found a track, that this was an area where these creatures were crossing. Just like if I was hunting for deer, I would scout the area. If I saw a lot of deer tracks, I'd say, hey, deer are living here or they're passing through, and this is a place where I would set up a blind and I would, attempt to hunt. So I kind of use the track thing as just a way to locate the possible traveling areas of the creatures. So, other things, I mean, obviously, if I see strands of hair or anything else, I would certainly try to discern what those were as far as evidence. So.
We're talking with Lyle Blackburn tonight on Spaced Out Radio. His website, lyleblackburn.com. You could see him all over television and all over the media regarding cryptozoology. I'm curious about your thoughts in regards to game cameras while you're searching for evidence. Many people who I have talked to in the Sasquatch community will say that for some reason Sasquatch seems to have a nose to wherever game cameras are set up and will not allow itself to be photographed for some reason. What is your take on that?
Well, yeah, it's a conundrum, because you think as many game cameras that are out there now, that certainly, one would slip up and get on film. But on the other hand, there has been instances where a group or some fellow investigators of mine or whatever, we've had game cameras in an area for long periods of time. And this is an area where there's definitely bears, for example, in which, even members of the team have seen bears, or locals have seen bears. So there's definitely bears. We've seen tracks, and somehow not one bear has gotten on that camera. So, it's not impossible that it's just either luck or the animals certainly could sniff those things out. There has been studies done that have definitively proved that alpha coyotes can sense the cameras and will avoid them. And so, you think, well, you kind of make a leap of logic and say, well, if Sasquatch exists and they're obviously more intelligent and probably would be much more intelligent than a coyote, then possibly they could sense the cameras. They could either smell it, the petroleum, the chemicals used to make it. They could sense the flash. I don't know, but it's not impossible to me that they could avoid it. I mean, and it's the only explanation, because, with as many game cameras out there as now, it's got to be something to it. It can't be just pure dumb luck that thousands and thousands of Sasquatch can continually just be that lucky. So, it's something that remains to be seen if somebody can get a good picture. I mean, there's certainly pictures, but a lot of them are just hard to identify. They're just, game cameras are not the best sources of evaluation. It's not like a wildlife photographer, pristine shot. So.
Does it piss you off after all the footage you have seen, whether it's photographs or video, that it seems like 98, 99% of them are blurry one way or another?
Yeah, that gets real old. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I mean, I've gotten to where I see so many of these things online. I don't even, I may look just to see, but I don't debate. I don't type into there like trying to discern. It's ridiculous. I mean, people that are trying to hoax this thing, they need to make it blurry. They need to cut the camera off too soon. All those things you see over and over with what is obviously not real images. It gets tiresome, because with the internet and the easy access to posting your video to the world, it's just so much of that stuff now that makes it difficult to weed out what's good and bad. So I just kind of keep my eyes open. If I see something that looks really good, I may follow up on that. But most of it is just typical and blurry, and it's not going to prove one thing either way, even if it is a Sasquatch.
You mentioned moments ago that you believe that Sasquatch may have a different intelligence compared to other animals out there. Do you believe that Sasquatch is a very, very smart creature, or do you believe that it's maybe so rogue and so old in its ways of thinking that it just has a total different way of being able to hunt and live in the forest that humans may not even know?
Yeah, I think it could be a little bit of both of that, actually. I mean, I think, and I just try to use logic, because if you size up the fact that if under the premise, say, using the premise that they do exist, if they do exist, logically, they have to be masters of evasion. I mean, they could not have gone this long without discovery if there wasn't something somewhat exceptional to them. And that could obviously be intelligence. I mean, it doesn't mean that they have language or they're as smart as humans. They may be as smart as some humans, but really, they've got to have a little bit of extra intelligence, and certainly they could just be such that, like you say, they could be so rogue and so efficient at what they do is they can remain very hidden. And it's only logical that if they do exist, those things would have to be, because to have evaded discovery all this time, they've got to be up and above your average animal.
What do you think of people who say they have continual communication with Bigfoot, and they've even established gifting sites for this creature in order to make contact with? Have you ever tried something like that, or are you even buying that?
Well, I've talked to several witnesses that have claimed things like that. And I've never really tried the whole gifting thing and all that. I'm more in the realm of I want to see it or get a photo. If something disappears from the woods at night, that could have been anything. It doesn't prove anything to me personally.
Become more intimate and interactive with Spaced Out Radio. Join our Space Travelers Club with your new membership. For $5 a month, we'll provide you with special access to the website, monthly prize draws from books to psychic readings, along with monthly newsletter, private interviews, and more. Sign up today to be part of Spaced Out Radio's experience.
Every month on Spaced Out Radio, we look into the deep and dark reports of cryptids roaming around the world with me, Rob Morphy from Cryptopia.us. I would love it if you would join me and host Dave Scott as we delve into the most arcane stories and reports regarding creatures of the unknown. My job is to hunt down the details and bring the evidence forward to you. These aren't your regular Bigfoot stories I'm talking about either. You can find out more about crypto history at spacedoutradio.com.
With an ever-expanding listenership base, Spaced Out Radio is the perfect place for you to advertise your product. Our listeners support those who sponsor this show. So whether you're an author or a company, Spaced Out Radio is the perfect place for you. Our pricing is more than competitive, and your advertisements will be seen and heard every show. Head to spacedoutradio.com and advertise with us today. Contact us at info@spacedoutradio.com today.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
Is the 24-hour world starting to wear you down? let me from Rivulet Reiki and Ratings lend you a hand. Hi, this is Jolene, and if you're in need of Reiki or a realm reading, come to my website, rivuletrr.wix.com/rivuletrr, and let us help you out. At Rivulet, I specialize in healing your body, mind, and soul, no matter where you are. And be sure to check out the Rivulet R&R Facebook page for your best deals. Remember, it's time for you to make some time for you.
Find yourself constantly looking up in the sky, looking for answers? Have you had extraterrestrial contact? Are you an abductee? Looking for answers to your experiences? Hi there, I'm R. Keith Andrews, Spaced Out Radio's resident ET expert. Join me live the first Friday of every month where I take questions from the Spaced Out Radio chat room and help you understand those from the far-off world. It's 2 hours of knowledge every experiencer should listen to. Hope to see you there.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
Would you like to connect with us on Spaced Out Radio? Head to spacedoutradio.com to check out the latest shows, guests, and sponsors. And don't forget to sign up for the Space Travelers Club. You'll find all you need at spacedoutradio.com. And welcome back for the second hour of Spaced Out Radio tonight. We really appreciate all of you joining us in the Spaced Out Radio chat room, along with Paranormal Into the Night and Paranormal Forum. Hey, if you want to follow us on Twitter, you could do so at Spaced Out Radio. You could give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show, along with our Spaced Out Radio group and Podcast Central. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR, and you can check out our YouTube channel for our archives, Spaced Out Radio Show. Subscribe to that. Our website, once again, is spacedoutradio.com. Tonight, we are talking all things crypto with investigator Lyle Blackburn. You've probably seen him around on numerous television shows, as well as his books online on Amazon at any major bookstore. His website is lyleblackburn.com. Lyle, thank you so much for joining us again. It's a real pleasure to have you on the air with us.
Oh, thanks. It's been great.
Wonderful. Lyle, one of the things that I am very curious about is I hear a lot of stories about the differences in Sasquatch behavior, whether it's up here in British Columbia straight down to California, maybe with the exception of being around the St. Helens area. But it seems like Bigfoot up here is a shy yet curious creature, but I've heard stories out of the bayou where Sasquatch is quite a vicious monster-type being. Have you noticed a difference from the people you've talked to or your own investigations yourself?
Well, yeah, there's obviously a certain reputation that further down here in the south, the Bigfoots are much more aggressive. You got stories of skunk apes and even other cryptids from swampy areas, the lizard man, for example, that have sensational cases where they've attacked people. I think some of that, in my investigation, is true. I mean, there's an exceptional amount of cases that the creatures do seem aggressive. Some of it, though, is, I think, based on a reputation. I think the old movie, The Legend of Boggy Creek, had a lot to do with that, because the movie did dramatize, real accounts of things that happened back in the 60s and 70s, and in some cases they were the creatures acted aggressive. But since this is a horror movie and it's on the big screen and everybody saw it, I think it gave everybody the sense that all the creatures down here were just out to kick your ass. And so, what I find, there's equally as many sightings in the South that just point to a shy creature. People see them briefly, the thing looks at them, it disappears into the woods. So it does behave like its northern counterparts, so to speak. But there still are some great stories, and I'm partial to those, I suppose, where you've got a run-in with a Sasquatch. It chases some people. It tries to get in the house. There was one in my book where a coon hunter was out hunting in the bayou one night, and he saw one, and it just kind of stared him down and just splashed water in his face, and it ran off. It's certainly something that reflects the culture. You know what I always say? I mean, certainly if I was a 7-foot tall, bulky ape-like creature covered in hair and I lived in one of these hot, humid swamps, well, I would be pretty mad and aggressive myself. So it may be something to do with the environment, perhaps. It may be something to do with, the creatures themselves and the species of these creatures that do live in the South. It's hard to say, but it's certainly intriguing stories, and some that I really like to tell in my books.
I guess the way I look at it is when you see and hear these stories from people who are being chased down or chased out of areas from Sasquatch, I mean, there is a danger to it, and you hope that you're not upsetting the creature in its own environment, because we see what bears or moose can do or deer can do when you are around, say, a mother and its youngsters. You don't want to get in between them, especially you're a dead man if you do. Do you think that maybe a lot of these aggressive sightings are because maybe it's a female and it's protecting their young?
Yeah, certainly. I think in some cases, you certainly, animals react that way, and each animal is going to be different depending on the situation. Yeah, and whatever perceived danger they're in. I mean, that's one of our worst fears, is where we go and there's all these hogs in these areas. If you walk between a mother hog and her, offspring, that's when you're most likely going to be rushed or attacked by one of these creatures. But if you just walk by at another time and it sees you from a distance, it may just sort of scurry off. So it literally depends on the case-by-case basis in which you might see one of these creatures and how it's going to react. And, I think some of those could be explained by it felt threatened and such like that. So,
with the amount of feral hogs that are in the area of the bayou and into Texas, do you believe that this is a food source for the Bigfoot?
Yeah, I think it would be. I mean, I think that, Sasquatch would be an opportunistic feeder. I mean, it's a very big creature. It's got to consume a lot of calories. It's got to eat what it's got to eat. And I think hogs would certainly be on the menu. And in fact, if you're a Sasquatch living in modern times here in the South, you would have a buffet of wild hogs, because there's literally so many of them now. When I was young and I used to hunt around Texas a lot, I never saw any hogs, none, and I was out a lot. And now when I go somewhere, I see evidence of hog rooting everywhere. And I see hogs all the time, and that was never the case before. So there's certainly, for any carnivorous creature that could predate on hogs, it would certainly be a great food source. And in fact, I've got a few stories, several great stories where hunters have seen hogs being slaughtered or captured by Sasquatch. In one case, there was a guy in East Texas who was sitting in a tree stand, and he said he was trying to bait some hogs in. Just about before the hogs got up to the bait side, he said he saw something out of the right-hand side of his stand. It was kind of moving from tree to tree, and as he focused in, he could see that this was like a huge 7-foot-tall ape-like creature, and it was literally just silently jumping from tree to tree. The hogs had no idea, and as soon as it got within jumping range of it, it just growled and leaped and grabbed one of those hogs and threw it up against a side of a tree. And so this guy had been interviewed by myself and 2 or 3 other people, and I have no reason to think that he was lying, but that certainly would show you that Sasquatch are certainly preying on these hogs.
Man, that's a story just enough to give you goosebumps. When you hear something like that, you feel like a pretty small creature if you're a human sitting in a tree stand when that happens.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the scariest part about that was not watching it get the hog, but the whole time, obviously, the creature was focused on the hogs, and once it had gotten the hog, the hunter said that, he thought it was just going to walk off. Well, the thing had picked up the hog, but then it just sort of turned slowly, and it looked ground level, and then it raised its head up and looked right up in that tree stand and looked right at that hunter, like, yeah, I know you're up there. And that guy just, at that point, he's, you're thinking, well, dude, you could have shot it. He said, he said it just looked so huge. He said, if I didn't knock it down or I missed or it just looked too human-like, I just wasn't going to make that shot. He said, but I certainly was in fear of my life, because if that thing had wanted to, it could just run right up that tree and grab me. But instead, it sort of acknowledged him, bared its teeth, reached down, picked up that hog again, and just walked off in the woods.
I have had a gentleman on this show named Eric Mothman, and he has a cabin in the swamp areas of Florida. And he has had Sasquatch take down a feral hog in his yard as well. And it would be awesome if you had an opportunity, or if I had an opportunity, to hook you two up, because his story is pretty incredible. When the Sasquatch actually walks up his patio stairs and goes into his cooler to take the feral hog that he had hunted already.
Oh, wow. Yeah, those are great. And I love to pair up stories like that, where I find one instance of, some independent witness saying he saw Sasquatch consuming or hunting hogs, and then you've got this other guy all the way in Florida saying that this thing came in and got some hog meat. So those are great parallels.
Well, I mean, you really can't blame Sasquatch, because bacon is a staple. I am a big fan of bacon, so you can't really blame them on that.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's like one of nature's best foods. I mean, come on,
Mm-hmm. I've never had feral hog, but I hope it would taste the exact same as what we get at the butcher shop.
Right. I think if you get the younger ones, you're all right. Those old boars, man, those are a little tough and gamey, but the younger ones are pretty tasty.
I would love for you, Lyle, to tell my listeners about the beast of Boggy Creek. What are we running into out there?
Well, in this case, and people often ask me, it's known as the Fylth monster, and people say, do you think it's a Bigfoot? Well, certainly I do. I mean, it's described as, roughly 7 feet tall, covered in hair. It's either dark brown, black, or reddish in color. It walks upright, and, fits the descriptions of Bigfoot. There's been tracks found that have 5 toes. There's been some that have 4, and there's been some that have 3. One of the most famous track finds back in 1971 had a strange trackway with a 3-toed human-like print, and so a lot of times that's associated with southern Sasquatch. But in general, without deviating over into the discussion of numbers of toes, it is a generally described Bigfoot creature. It was made famous, again, by the 1972 movie The Legend of Boggy Creek. A director from Arkansas was first attracted to some stories in the newspaper in which people described seeing this creature in the area of Fylth. It's a small, very small town in southwest Arkansas, and come to find out, there has been a long history of sightings that had never been in the paper, and he went down there and literally got the people to reenact the sightings. It was almost like horror movies meet Monster Quest or something way before its time, because what you get is this very realistic docudrama type film that was truly quite scary. I mean, it's very scenic and spooky, and the area has a lot of bayous with the cypress trees and the moss, and very creepy looking. So that kind of made the case famous, and the Fylth monster became somewhat internationally known because of the movie. So for me personally, I saw the movie back in the 70s when I was a little kid, and being somebody who was interested in Bigfoot, that really clicked for me, because this wasn't the Bigfoot of the Pacific Northwest where you live. This was something that was closer to me, because I only live about 3 hours from Fylth. So, that was in my own backyard, so to speak. And that really, fired me up about Bigfoot and everything. And so years later, when I was starting to write articles and to, pursue cryptozoology in my adulthood, that was sort of the pinnacle topic. And I couldn't believe that nobody had ever written a book on that, because the movie had been quite famous, and many Bigfoot researchers would say, oh yeah, that movie was a huge influence on me. So, I set out to really research for a couple of years, and I wrote the Beast of Boggy Creek book. And so it sort of was full circle for me, from seeing the movie and then to try to look into it as an adult with a rational mind, to try to say, what all went on here? What's truth? What's reality? What was in the film? What were these people seeing?
Now, we all have a picture of what Sasquatch is supposed to look like. The Patterson-Gimlin film is probably the best caption of that. Is this creature similar in looks to what we see on the Patterson-Gimlin film, or does it have its own look from nature?
Well, yeah, some of the descriptions are a little more vague, and they could equate to the Patterson-Gimlin. But most times it seems to be a little more lean. The hair seems to be longer. In some cases, the witnesses say that the hair was so scraggly it kind of came down over its eyes, and it was even longer atop the head, and hair hangs down maybe 3 to 4 inches off the body. So it does seem to be a little. The description is almost a little creepier. It's a little more unkempt, if you will, and a lot of times not quite so big in stature. I mean, 7 foot would be an average description, but I've got a lot of folks that see smaller versions of the creature. Now, of course, you can obviously have juveniles, but I just don't think they grow quite as big, which would seem to make sense. This is a much hotter and environment. Tougher area to live, I think, if you're quite a big creature with hair. So yeah, I think there is some differences, and I mean, these kind of equate to the descriptions of creatures. If you start looking into the sightings in East Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, on over to Florida, where you have the skunk ape sightings, I think it correlates to a creature that is, certainly related and part of the Bigfoot family of the northern Bigfoots, but has certainly developed somewhat of its own look based on its environment, I suppose.
We are talking with Lyle Blackburn tonight on Spaced Out Radio. His website, lyleblackburn.com. You can find any of his books on his website at amazon.com or any bookstore across North America. I highly suggest you pick it up, or at least one of the copies up today. Lyle, when you look at the Boggy Creek creature, and you call it a beast in your book, there's a legend, there's so many names to this. Is this one of those situations in Arkansas where it's kind of like what the Mothman is in West Virginia?
Oh, certainly. I mean, Fylth has modern times become a destination for tourists to drop by, people who've heard of the legend of Boggy Creek or that know things about Bigfoot. It's like Point Pleasant for the Mothman, and there's a store there called the Monster Mart, and they've tried to actually offer people something to see there. I've worked with them to try to offer some visuals to people that come down there, because Fylth is a really, really small place. There's no motels, there's no place to stay. You just sort of drive through, you barely know you're there. But believe it or not, people come from everywhere. I mean, there's a sign-in book up there, and there's people from New Zealand, Korea, all 50 states coming in there on a weekly basis just because of the legend of Boggy Creek. So yeah, I think it's built a mystique like the Mothman, and it's sort of a small town monster, and It's been featured on plenty of TV shows. Usually when I've been on a TV show, it's because they want to cover the Fylth monster. And obviously I'm the guy who wrote the book. So, I get a call. So, with that kind of ongoing proliferation in the stories and legends, it's something that has, you can look up Arkansas travel destinations and Fylth is going to be on there,
I hear you there, and that's good for the community, to be honest with you. I mean, it's much like Roswell or, like we said, Point Pleasant with Mothman. I mean, there are areas that they could really use these tourism dollars, so it is good for the area. But are people today still seeing the Beast of Boggy Creek?
Yes, they are. And that was one of the things that really amazed me when I initially started the research years ago, is I thought in the most part, I was going to be writing a historical book. It would be, here's the sightings that the movie was based on, and, here's all these old sightings. But what I found that, once the movie hubbub died down, the paper had kind of moved on, people were still seeing creatures out in the area. It just wasn't highly publicized. And so, I began to track down the witnesses and find out these stories. And my book goes up to about 2010 was about where I left off with the last sighting before I turned in the manuscript. And I've been investigating sightings up there ever since. There's been a couple of recent ones that I thought were, in fact, some of the most incredible sightings that I've investigated as of yet. So yes, there's still definitely people seeing it, and the mystery remains open.
Do you believe then that or what is your opinion then, I should ask that rather, about people maybe heading into the area trying to hunt the creature?
Well, that, it was when the movie got really popular, that was a huge problem. I mean, there was people running amok down there trying to hunt it. And that I've seen this in several cryptid cases in the past where, newspaper and TV coverage has attracted a motley crew of hunters to these areas. Nowadays, you do have, you've got Bigfoot hunters that go down there. I think most of them are very respectful of the area, or, a lot of times will email me and I kind of tell them where to camp and where to go. And they're very respectful about people's properties and things like that, because, that's the main thing the town has a problem with. I think they can take it or leave it with the legend, but they just don't want people running on their private property. So you do have people going down there to research all the time, but they're always very respectful. And I think the town, at least a lot of it, appreciates, people dropping by and, spending their money at the local stores,
How often do you make your way up there now for an investigation, or are you waiting for future information before you make your way up there?
Well, I just kind of go wherever I get leads, wherever I think there's a credible story, whether that's up there in Arkansas. I mean, I, visit various states as economically feasible, Oklahoma and all out through the South. I've been all over to Florida even recently and in around. But, as far as Fylth, it's just sort of like, I guess, I don't know, as my first book and my sort of initial fascination with this, I try to go up there every other month at least. And some of those do involve me interviewing a witness, whether they had seen it recently or somebody who's finally like, I didn't want to tell you this. I just didn't want people to know, but they've come to see me as somebody who's, a serious researcher, and I treat it fairly in my book. So people who say they've seen something in the past. So I'm still getting people coming forward, even after all these years, who are wanting to share their stories. So that's great. So I just follow up when I can.
How big of an area is that, Lyle, for people who've never been into the bayou? I know I'm one of them. When I think of the bayou, I think of something that is very swampy, a lot of alligators and cottonmouth snakes that both scare the living hell out of me, so I don't think I'm going there anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very remote area, as it goes. I mean, there's been a lot of development through there. I mean, it's certainly not like it was in the 70s, but there's still a certain amount of that bayou area that's just, you just can't really develop it. And a lot of it's locked up by, wildlife areas. There's a Sulphur River Wildlife Management Area, which is about 20,000 acres set aside of wildlife habitat that no one lives there. And the Sulphur River runs through there, and it spills over into what's called Mercer Bayou, which is, just when you think of the spooky bayou out of a horror movie, that is it. I mean, it looks, it was the perfect place to film a film like The Legend of Boggy Creek, because it has the look, and it's just like a real life monster movie. And people, I think, don't have a sense of how much remote and rugged land there is out there unless you really go there. And to me, it's a beautiful place, and I love it. The more spooky it is, I go around there at night, I see those gators right outside of our canoe. It's all part of the thing for me. But when you are out there, you just see how wild it is and how thick it is. Something could be standing 10 feet away right into those bushes, and you would never see it. I mean, it's amazing. And there's just, so many miles of land like that out there that it's just some place where I think it's possible something could exist back there.
When you mention that something could be standing 10 feet away from you and you wouldn't even know, how dangerous of an area is this? And it's obviously then no wonder why this legend of Boggy Creek is walking around there scot-free.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly a dangerous area. I mean, that it's thick and hard to get through there, especially in the summer months when it's real grown up. And there's a lot of pitfalls. People always say, "Oh, I mean, aren't you scared? What would you do if you saw this creature?" I'm like, dude, that's the least of my worries. I mean, there's, I've seen plenty of cottonmouths. I nearly walked up on a gator. We were walking one of the roads back there near the bayou, and the bayou is zigzags back and forth. And so you may be walking a straight line, and sometimes you're very near the bayou channel and sometimes you're not. But we didn't know that we were so near to the bayou channel until we came up some tall grass, and I heard this big rustle, and I saw this huge tail fly up above that grass. And I mean, I was probably 15 feet from a gator. Now, he went off into the water, but had I just run through there, I would have just stepped right on him. So those are the things that to me are more scary than the creature itself. In some ways, that may change if I actually see it, but until such time, the local wildlife is certainly something to be reckoned with.
We are talking with Lyle Blackburn tonight on Spaced Out Radio. We're at our break at the bottom of the hour. When we come back, we're going to talk Lizard Man. I've never heard of it, and I am intrigued. Let's find out right after this. You're listening to Spaced Out Radio. I am your host, Dave Scott. We'll be right back.
Looking for a place to get your product to the public? Advertise with us at Spaced Out Radio. At spacedoutradio.com, you can check out our pricing and packages that best suit your budgetary needs. Whether you're a budgeted author or a company looking to expand, our listeners support the products that support spacedoutradio.com. Advertising with us is an effective way to get your message out. Contact us at info@spacedoutradio.com and get your ads out today.
Visit purpleplates.com today. For over 40 years, the Purple Energy Plates have been delivering amazing results for their many customers. Inspired by the great genius Nikola Tesla, the harmony, healing, and energetic effects of the plates have proven over and over to be beneficial and often miraculous to thousands of customers. With their money-back guarantee and the many benefits, how can you afford not to get one? Check their site for daily specials and choose from their many energy products. You won't be sorry. Visit them today at purpleplates.com for mind, body, and spirit. And expect a miracle.
Right here, this is where we divulge the fruit of our research. Here on the Webster Phenomena every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. On Spaced Out Radio. And we give it up to you guys, all the listeners and the live listeners usually get something special and hang out in the chat room. And we love to have you. So we'll see you every Saturday night at 8 p.m. You know where.
Attention Spaced Out Radio listeners. For only $5 a month, you can join Spaced Out Radio Space Travelers. Your membership at spacedoutradio.com will give you access to private fan area on the website, get you a monthly newsletter, draws for monthly swag, and a whole lot more. Sign up today to become a part of the Spaced Out Radio experience.
You hear footsteps in the empty room above you. A rocking chair begins rocking by itself. Don't be afraid of the things that go bump in the night. Reach for Spirit Storybox, the iPhone app the Huffington Post UK called the only ghost hunting app you will ever need. Spirit Storybox. The spirits are telling their stories. Are you listening?
Strange creatures lurking in the night, the sounds of wood knocking in the forest, odd happenings right out of a fictional world. These are the reports I love. Hi there, this is author Ronald Murphy, and I would love it if you join me and Spaced Out Radio host Dave Scott the second Wednesday of every month on our journey into the unknown land of cryptozoology at spacedoutradio.com. From Mothman to Frogman and everything in between. Hey, they don't call me the crypto guru for nothing.
The last Monday of the month on Spaced Out Radio is a night of psychic vision, mediumship, UFO and ET contact, Bigfoot stories, animal communication, and so much more with me, Elizabeth Anglin. I'd love it if you would join host Dave Scott and I on the myriad of topics we delve into. Every month, we share new views that may help you understand your own experiences. So tune on in at spacedoutradio.com and stamp your cosmic passport.
Did you know that Spaced Out Radio runs 7 days a week? Hi, it's James Tyson from Spaced Out Weekend. Every Saturday and Sunday night, starting at 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern, you can join me and my guests for some great chatter about what's going on out in the universe, or even in that dark part of the basement you really don't want to go back into. Well, let's find the answers to your experiences together. So come on up to Uncle Jimbo's cabin on the weekend. For more information, look us up at spacedoutradio.com.
Missed most of tonight's show? Don't worry, you didn't miss a thing. You can head to our website, spacedoutradio.com, and download our archives for free. And don't forget to get your Space Travelers membership today. Now, back to tonight's show. Welcome back to Spaced Out Radio. As we've rounded third, we're heading for home tonight on the show. Our guest is Lyle Blackburn. His website, lyleblackburn.com. If you want to check out his bio, his photos, videos, book links, everything, lyleblackburn.com. Before we bring Lyle back on, I do want to remind you that you can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio. You can give our Facebook page a like, Spaced Out Radio Show. You can also ask to join our private Spaced Out Radio group, as well as our other group, Podcast Central. On Instagram, I can be followed at Dave Scott, SOR, and our YouTube channel is Spaced Out Radio Show. You could subscribe to that. And, of course, our website is spacedoutradio.com. Once again, I want to say thank you to everyone participating and listening in the Spaced Out Radio chat room, Paranormal Into the Night, and Paranormal Forum. For the final time tonight, we bring Lyle Blackburn into Spaced Out Radio. My friend, I got to ask you, where did you get that cowboy hat? I love that cowboy hat. And I'm sure you get a lot of compliments on it.
Yeah, it's like a part of me now. That thing is like my most prized possession, I think. It came from Mexico, actually, so it's authentic, and I got it years and years ago when I started a band that was kind of this outlaw Western type of thing, and I just thought I need a hat. I used to wear one when I was a kid, but I found that one, and it fits right, and I guess people identify me with it because if they see me without the hat, or I'm wearing just a baseball hat or whatever, they're like, where's the hat? Like, I need to wear it all the time. But hey, that's awesome.
I love it, man. I'm a baseball camp aficionado, and I don't have a big collection because I'm pretty picky. But when you find a hat, you got to run with it. That's the one thing I do know.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Lyle, I have heard about a lot of creatures, and lately, besides Sasquatch, we've been hearing so many cases of Dog Man. I've heard of Goat Man. I am very unfamiliar with Lizard Man. And a lot of people would look at Lizard Man and say, there is no way in hell this creature is real. But you're investigating it. Tell us what Lizard Man is.
Lizard Man is a creature. There's been sightings around North America, but in particular, a place called Bishopville in South Carolina, one of the southern states, where people reported seeing a 7-foot tall human-like figure that was covered in scales. It appeared to be lizard-like. It was often described either as brownish or greenish. Not too often did they say it had a tail, although in a few cases they did. But by all accounts, it was just some kind of a scaly humanoid creature that the locals there in Bishopville started calling the Lizard Man. And so this is something that I had read about in cryptozoology books here and there, and read about some cases, and that just Lizard Man just sounded creepy to me. It was, it was like a modern day creature from the Black Lagoon. So that's kind of how I kind of just became fascinated with stories of that creature.
And this is a very aggressive creature from what I have read on it as I look it up here while we're doing this. I mean, there's pictures of it attacking cars, or it looks like it's attacked cars in order to, kind of get rid of its anger almost. Like, this is an aggressive creature.
Yeah, certainly. That's one of those where, I mean, the most famous sighting, which occurred in 1988 there in Bishopville, a young man was out near this area called Skateboard Swamp. Yes, a swamp again. And he had a flat tire out there around 2 a.m. And as he just finished changing this tire, under the moonlight, he could see something coming at him through this fennel grass. It was running towards him. At first, he thought it was a person, but then he started to realize it was too big. It appeared to be scaly. It had longish arms. What he said were 3-fingered hands with long fingernails. Well, if obviously he saw something like this, he jumped back in his car and started to take off. Well, this thing tried to grab him and jump in the car. He eventually managed to get away, but that story just sort of became the focal point of this Bishopville Lizard Man case, especially because this young man and his father actually went to the sheriff and told this story, and the police were actually actively looking in to see what the hell this was. So that right there was something that was often associated with the Lizard Man of being aggressive. What you mentioned about the cars, that's another strange aspect of this whole case, in which people reported their cars being literally mauled by an animal. They would look like they had been bitten or chewed up. And all of this played into a time period in which people were seeing what the locals called the Lizard Man in and around the Skateboard Swamp. So there was a lot of strange stuff going around, and that kind of built that whole Bishopville Lizard Man case.
Has anybody had their life threatened by this creature, or had that close of a contact where they felt that their life was in danger?
Certainly Christopher Davis, that young man, he was scared to death by the whole thing. And no matter, I mean, it's hard to say without hard proof. It's hard to say what that kid actually saw. But I visited at length there in Bishopville with the sheriff who was there and investigated all this back in the late 80s. And there's no doubt that something happened to that kid. He saw something. I mean, he didn't make this story up. I mean, he wasn't down at the police station making up wild stories. He even took lie detector tests. And most people agree that, something happened to that kid and it traumatized him. And he was the only one that really had a close run-in like that. I mean, there was a general fear in the town, and there was another witness who had seen it just across a bridge there on Skateboard Swamp. And I mean, he was obviously scared, but the thing didn't come after him. He took off and got away. But, it was a definite sense of fear going on with this creature at the time of the sightings.
Now, this sighting happened in 1988, I believe, with Christopher. Have there been any other sightings of this creature, or was it a one-and-done affair?
No, there were quite a few others. In fact, the way that whole story got started and the way it came to the attention of the sheriff's office was that somebody had called just prior to Christopher Davis. They had called down there and said, "Hey, we got up this morning. We came out. It looks like our car was chewed up by an animal." And so the deputies went down there to check it out, and they're thinking, I don't know what's going on. So, the sheriff reports down there, and they're just trying to figure out what's going on because these, people seem legit, and something had indeed ripped up their car. Well, that's when some of the locals kind of started coming around and to see what was going on, and they suggested, perhaps the lizard man did it. And the sheriff was like, "What do you mean, the lizard man?" And they're like, "Well, people have been seeing this thing around here, some kind of creature running through the swamp, and we call it the lizard man." And so that kind of piqued their interest. Well, it wasn't for a couple of weeks later that Christopher Davis came in and told his story. So at that point, as in most of these cryptid cases, then several other witnesses now thought, well, okay, if other people are seeing it, I'm going to come forward. And so they said, look, 2 years ago, I was down in that swamp. We were building a pen for my livestock. I look over there, and there's some sort of human-looking thing, standing in the swamp, and it ran off, and so stories started coming forward. And then after Christopher Davis's sighting, for a period of about 2 years, there was several other sightings of the creature that went on in that area. So, and all the while, the sheriff was trying to look into it, not necessarily because he believed it was a lizard man per se, but he knew these people weren't making this stuff up. People were frightened, and whether it was somebody pulling a prank or maybe it was a mangy bear or whatever the case was, he felt that he really needed to look into it and follow through, because if it killed somebody, then they would hold him responsible because he didn't do anything. So it was an interesting case because you do have a lot of police records. I mean, he got these witnesses to write down what they had seen. He would separate groups of them and have them all write it down. You don't often have affidavits and written records of any of this type of stuff that were taken seriously by police. So it was a cool case, because of that as well.
What do you think it is, Lyle?
Well, it's much harder to reconcile a lizard man. I mean, let's face it, Bigfoot, maybe a primate, you can say, that could exist. But lizard man obviously is a further leap, especially from a biological standpoint, because, you just cannot cross humans and reptiles in any form or fashion. So, some of the theories are that these are extraterrestrial creatures. They are subterranean underground dwellers that come up from time to time. There's a race of reptoids, for example. Some people believe they're shapeshifters. Personally, I found that a lot of these witnesses, I started looking at the police records, and a lot of them would describe it as being brown, and they said they thought it had hair. So to me, it seems kind of crazy to explain one cryptid with another cryptid, but I got the feeling that perhaps people were actually seeing a Bigfoot that had been affected, maybe a skin condition, or it was, wet. It was obviously a swampy area. Maybe it was wet. It was glistening. And perhaps people had actually seen a Sasquatch, and just, you get this in all cases where the locals just give it a name, or the newspaper gives it a name. And once they gave it the name lizard man, automatically your mind goes to this sort of dinosaur man or whatever, which is a little unrealistic compared to what people truly reported, what the descriptions were. So I thought, it's possible it was a Bigfoot. Beyond that, man, I just can't say, because it is one crazy case. But for me, it's just the approach I take, especially on the book, the Lizard Man book, is just, hey, I'm just telling the story of what happened. I obviously cannot prove it one way or another, but I'm presenting all the case information. It's a cool story, and here it is, and we can all decide from there,
See, this creature makes my imagination go wild. There is no way I would go into the bush knowing that there's a possibility of running into this, because my luck, it's going to happen. And I'm a meal. I'm not an appetizer. I'm a meal. And, I look at this creature and the descriptions you're giving. If it is that aggressive, it must keep a lot of people out of its area because people don't know what they're dealing with.
Yeah. I mean, certainly would, stand to reason that if the creature did live in there, he obviously would not want people to go back in that swamp. And again, Scapewar Swamp, especially at the time, was remote. It's rugged. I mean, I had stories of the police officer telling me he had chased a moonshiner through there once, and he literally fell in quicksand. I mean, I used to be scared of quicksand when I was a kid, but then I quickly learned that you just don't see it. But I mean, he's telling me that there's things like that back there. And he said people just didn't go back there very much, only the ruggedest of hunters. And so it was truly a remote place. And something that, again, it's not out of the question that some kind of creature could live back there relatively unseen.
When I think of this creature, maybe it's the E.T. experiencer that I am, but I think extraterrestrial because we hear so many people talk about reptilians and reptilian races that people have had run-ins with. Have you ever thought about that theory in regards to what this creature could be?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that's one of the things I addressed. My problem with at least the extraterrestrial part is that there wasn't any reported UFO sightings that corresponded with it, in the time period that it was happening, or even in the few years preceding or following. There was no, it just seemed, why would the extraterrestrial be out there in Scapewar Swamp? You would expect. Now, if you had all these UFO sightings and then suddenly people are seeing a lizard man, well, I'm putting two and two together, So, I couldn't correlate a history of UFO sightings in this area with the creature. Now, the reptilian thing, again, I just question why it would be in Scapewar Swamp. I'm not sure, but it's certainly, those are the theories when they come to Lizard Man, because the Bishopville Lizard Man case, may be one of the most famous of those type cases of reptilian humanoid type creatures, but it's certainly not the only one. And, if you got to try to look at them as a whole and go from there. In fact, I don't know how far do you know where Thetis Lake is in British Columbia?
I do, yes.
Well, you might want to take a trip down there because there's one of these creatures said to be living down in that area, the Thetis Lake monster. And it's I looked into that as part of my contrast and compare the Bishopville Lizard Man with sightings elsewhere around North America where people had reported seeing bipedal scaly creatures. And I found that Thetis Lake had some reports back in the 70s in which some kids saw something come out of that lake. And, there wasn't, I didn't feel too confident about some of those stories, and some of them had retracted their statements. However, I talked to a fisherman who had an experience down there not too long ago in which it was, truly spooky. So he was getting in his car at the end of the evening about to take off, and he sees something running up towards his car, and the description was somewhat like the Thetis Lake monster descriptions. And this guy was certainly not a teenager. He wasn't a kid making up stories. And so that was really kind of spooky, the whole thing. But yeah, so you may have a lizard man-like creature in your own backyard there.
See, that scares the heck out of me, man, because I've already been in 2 lakes where there are sea monsters here in BC. I had known about the Ogopogo in Okanagan Lake, but on Vancouver Island, north of Thetis Lake, which is about 2.5-hour drive, there's a lake called Cameron Lake that there's supposed to be a sea monster in. And my buddies and I, we'd go fishing in there, walk in waist deep, not even knowing about it. Now, don't even go near it. There's just certain things that I will not do. But, if there is a lizard man on Vancouver Island, it is definitely something that does pique my interest. But I'm much closer to Ogopogo now.
All right. Well, there you go. Well, to me, it sounds like you're living in a really great place. I mean, there's a lot of good monster history right in one area. So that's, let alone the whole Sasquatch Association with British Columbia. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Have you ever investigated up here?
No, I haven't. I've been in the Pacific Northwest many times touring as a musician, and I've been out when I could into the woods, but I've never really had what I consider a considerable time to go on any investigations. And I haven't been to British Columbia parts of Canada, only to like Toronto and Ontario and things. So no, not. I would love to get up there more if I could.
Yeah, the Bigfoot up here really seemed to be, and like I said, I only have one incident with it, but from the people that I've spoken to in this area, they seem to be very, very curious creatures, but very, very wary of people in general. So there really isn't much difference from what it is down there. But I mean, in regards to Lizard Man, or from other legends that I've heard up here from Thunderbirds taking people and using them as food, to the sea monsters, yeah, there's a lot of things happening here in BC.
Yeah, certainly. And I've as somebody who's studied these subjects, you tend to notice what places on the map keep cropping up, and that's certainly one of the places that does, and it seems it's always on my bucket list to spend some time up there if I can, if I could get enough time to do it.
Are there any creatures, Lyle, that you really want to try and investigate or have an experience with before your time is up?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a number of things. I mean, luckily, I also live in an area, we've got so-called chupacabra sightings, the lizard man, numerous Bigfoot sightings. I've been interested in some of the Thunderbird sightings down in South Texas. There's a lot of that, so that's one thing. I mean, I would just love to see one of those huge flying creatures at some point in my life. That's always fascinated me. It seems like that sort of southern Texas desert area would be great. But there's really a whole list. I mean, there's lake monsters galore. I'd love to do sit out on Lake Champlain and Okanagan and spend a lot of time looking for those type creatures as well. They all fascinate me. So there's just an endless list, really.
It's nothing that will ever change your curiosity, because as long as these stories are out there, you have the drive to go, don't you?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, and it hasn't, really, I haven't, people ask me, you do this, do you lose fascination or passion for it? I really don't. I mean, honestly, I just, I still feel that kind of same fascination as when I was sitting in that drive-in and when I was a kid watching The Legend of Boggy Creek. It's still just so fascinating. And to me, it's more about, not necessarily about seeing one or whatever. It's just following up on these stories and putting the stories together, like, the Bishopville Lizardman case. Nobody had ever written a book. There was just all this piecemeal information everywhere, bits and parts of other books. I'm like, the whole case is just crazy. I mean, the police were investigating all this stuff, and to me, it's all about the mystery and the pursuit and putting these stories together. So that's, my passion there. And if I actually got to see one of these up close, even better. That would be amazing, but I hope for that day, but it doesn't depend on that day. I've got plenty of other things to research, as far as documenting, and I feel it's one of my roles is just documenting some of these cases, these cases that have been around, but nobody ever really got the whole story,
Mm-hmm. I fully understand exactly what you're talking about in regards to it, because you have it in your blood. You have this drive to just continue the investigation. One of the things that we touched on earlier in the show, as we only got a couple minutes left here tonight, is you mentioned about the fact that you carry a gun with you, because never mind the elements and Bigfoot or lizard man, whatever it is, there's a lot of dangerous animals around. You mentioned alligators, cottonmouth snakes, the feral hogs. When it comes to people who carry guns, do you think it's necessary that if you came across a Sasquatch to be the guy who shoots it?
I personally wouldn't shoot one. There's arguments on both of those sides as well, and I can see the argument that it's never going to be proved unless you have a body, or you can't set aside, conservation land without a body. But that's unto each individual. I carry the gun strictly, obviously, for my own protection and survival, and in case I need it. And that's just as a hunter and somebody who's been in the woods, I know that things can happen, and there's a lot of unpredictable things out there. And so I feel better about protecting myself and my friends with that, but it's never for the purpose to shoot a cryptid. And if I did see a Bigfoot, I think at this point, I just would like to see one, and that's cool for me. I don't need to prove it to the world, really. That's probably somebody else's role. So yeah, I wouldn't personally shoot one.
My friend, I really hope you have the experience. It was so enlightening and awakening for me when I had mine. I didn't even think about bringing out my iPhone to take a picture or recording something along with it. I just wanted to enjoy the experience for what it was worth. And I hope one day you get that opportunity too as well.
Well, I appreciate it. I hope so. And, I think a lot of people, say, oh, there's so many, everybody's got a phone. Why didn't they take a picture? Well, you can attest for that. It's like, it's a split second. It's a brief thing. And you could be overtaken with just the visual before you start getting out an app to crank up your phone,
For sure. Lyle, it is the beginning of April. What do you have coming up for conferences in the rest of the year where people might be able to check you out, come shake your hand and say hello?
I got a lot of stuff coming up. April 23rd, I'll be at the Arkansas Bigfoot Conference in Bologna, Arkansas. That's like North Arkansas. Following that, I'll be at a horror convention called Texas Frightmare, April 29th through May 1st in Dallas, Texas. And then to the Big Daddy of Bigfoot conferences, the Ohio Conference, May the 13th or 14th, one of those days, that weekend. Great conference there. So yeah, I'll be out and about. So I'm always look forward to meeting anybody out there to come up and say hi and let's visit about cryptids. It's always great to meet people.
Lyle, thank you so much for being on Spaced Out Radio tonight. It's an absolute pleasure to get you on the air with us. It's been great. Your stories are incredible, and continued success with your books and your investigations.
Oh, thanks so much. I really appreciate you having me on. I enjoyed it.
Taking over. We the people are little brother, standing by to dethrone each other, watching you and watching me. Paranoid, the lens is our weapon, desensitized in our lust for attention, democratized by our voyeur obsessions, watching you and watching me. Slaves to perfection, don't let them project you as you are. Reveal your every flaw. I know you're out there somewhere. We watched you for so long. Wait for you to fall. We will expose mother wants to make headlines, be immortalized. Everyone's got an electric eye, where the digital spies. They've watched you for so long. I know you're out there somewhere watching me. Eyes are waiting for you to break. Stay in line, don't make a mistake. We're watching.